following are adaptations to increase fine motor skill development. Fine motor adaptations are meant to increase the fine motor skills that students use every day, whether they're picking up things, buttoning clothes, holding a pencil, and making things. One of the first things I do is teach students how to tear paper, and there's a right and wrong way of tearing paper. A lot of times you give them tear a piece of paper and tell them not to tear it up. They'll say, well, can I use scissors? But just encourage them that the tearing is a fun activity. So sometimes they'll just grab it and rip it like that, and that's not using any fine motor skills. What you want to teach is a pinch, pinch, pull method. So pulling it, pinch, pinch, pull, and tearing, using these pinchers, building up the pincher strength in the fingers and the hand. After that, I usually have them tear little mosaic pieces. Sometimes my students with special needs will just have fun just tearing piles of little colorful paper to use in a project. Here's an instance where there was a story of a little girl who made a picture by leaving the circle blank, and here they use little pieces of colorful paper to make a mosaic-like effect. Another torn paper technique could be using torn paper and the edges of it to create a landscape or a seascape picture. Using stickers is another great activity for students who also have cognitive impairments. They can use these to make a background. So you see when you start to peel off a sticker, and these are a little harder than other ones, but you're using your pinchers to pull it off and place it. So you don't want the paraprofessional just peeling them off and handing to the student. You actually want them peeling it off. If those are a little bit too thin for your student, if their fingers are a little more clumsy, then I suggest you get like little thicker ones. These are made out of the little foam pieces, but they're still using their pinchers. So there's different thicknesses of foam stickers. If this is too hard to use, then maybe this big thick one would be easier for students to use and apply. So those are another great activity. Anytime you can use small pieces for an activity and get the children to actually make their hand into a little cup or hold a little cup, it's a great activity. Occupational therapists have told me that the thumb muscles are becoming overdeveloped and this part of the hand is not being developed enough, and that's coming from texting and too much gaming. So we want to build up the muscles in here, and that can be done by either putting some in their hand and telling them they have to hold it, and then that they have to use their pinchers and take and put each one on glue drops to hold them in place. So you could use mosaic pieces for a little mosaic project. You could do that with something like sequins or buttons that they have to glue on, or even beads. So I use beads for a lot of activities. A simple activity that I sometimes put in the center for students to do, if I see a student finishes early and they have some fine motor concerns, I might put this activity on the table. And it's just giving them a pipe cleaner and telling them to thread at least 10 or 15 beads onto the pipe cleaner. I usually put a limit because I get some kids that want to put 1,000,000 beads on. And then you can turn that into a bracelet or you can make it a bookmark. But that's great eye-hand coordination and also doing some fine motor work. If those beads are too small for your student, then you can also shop for some bigger beads. I like to give a long piece of yarn or a lanyard, because then when they actually have to put the bead on, they have to pull it all the way down to the end, and that's crossing the midline of the body, which builds trunk stability and increases gross motors. So we need to build gross motor development first and then fine motor. Another option for large beads would be using some big wooden beads and stringing them together. When it comes to drawing materials, I like to make my pencils a little bit shorter and sharpen them down or save my old ones just for this activity, because when the pencil's shorter, they're kind of forced to hold it the correct way using their pinchers. Same with crayons. If I give a student a full-size crayon, they can still hold it like this and draw, or hold it like that and draw, or we're trying to get them holding it this way. If you give them a broken crayon or a small crayon, then they can't grab it that way. They're kind of forced to hold it this way and do their coloring. So small crayons force It's also good to draw some little tiny areas for an exercise and have them actually try to work on just coloring small, because when you're coloring small like this, you're actually really working the hand a lot as opposed to coloring bigger. Some kids will get there, the whole arm movement's happening, where if you work small, you're really working on your fine motor skills. Lacing is another great thing to practice. And whether you do it as a project, like a little fish picture, if you need a tracer, the student can have a tracer, but you can make this into a fun little rainbow fish project. As long as you're encouraging students to use their eye-hand coordination and focus on taking it and then pulling it through. Shoelaces are another great way to do lacing. Or you could even give them a piece of the foam and hole punch it and lace that way as an activity, or turn it into a lesson for your entire class where they have to do some lacing. It would be the same with the mosaic pieces. You could turn the lesson into a class project. If I was doing something like this on ancient Roman art, I would have them, if they made the papers themselves, the students painted the papers and then cut them up, I would have cut them first with a paper cutter in long strips, and then just have them do the little snips to make the squares or rectangles, so that you don't want to fatigue the hand. I hope you've enjoyed these fine motor activities.